Okay, looks like we've got everybody in. Welcome to the second State of Marketing webinar with your friends at Applied Art here. Today we're going to be talking about a lot of different things, a lot of fun stuff, mainly ways to stand out with your messaging, email newsletter frequency, a beginner's guide to your video conferencing and all that type of stuff as well as just a live Q&A. So we want to really be as engaging and answer a lot of your questions live as we can. You guys are taking time out of your day to watch and listen, so we want to be responsive and help you guys out with that. So if you're new to Zoom and this is your first time being on a Zoom webinar, on the right-hand side, there's going to be a chat box that you can put live questions and comments throughout the presentation there. If you want to submit questions to our panel to answer, we can also field those as well, and you can even send those anonymously if you don't want people to know who you are or anything like that. So you can do that in the Q&A area on the bottom left-hand side of your screen as well. So today we are joined by our panel. We have George and Mark, who are our partners at Applied Art. And we also have Shannon, who is our business development manager as well. And then I'm Ryan, I'm in digital marketing. So we'll be answering any of your questions that you have. So like I said, if you have questions in the chat, feel free to put those in there, as well as Q&A as well. And I'll be moderating those and sending those to the proper folks. So we'll get started with our first topic here, which was ways that you can connect with your messaging and how you can stand out. So Shannon, do you want to talk a little bit about that for everybody?
Sure, thanks. Obviously, we're in some pretty uncertain times. And one of the keys to any kind of communication, whether it's with an existing customer or a prospective client, is to communicate value and insights rather than just features and benefits. It's really easy to just show up and talk about all that we have to offer as a company, but that really isn't what folks are looking for now. Our messages really, they have to resonate with what they're experiencing in their personal life. They're interested in themselves, their business, their problems, their goals, their plans, their dreams. Some are concerned about their jobs, and most are concerned about their family safety. So they're also interested in what's going on in the economy and the outside world. So industry trends, whatever's happening and whatever vertical you might be targeting is important to them. They care about whatever threats they might soon face. They're interested in maybe unanticipated opportunities. If you can be a resource for them by pointing out things that you've researched or learned or heard, they're going to want to know those kinds of things. They want truthful information that is compelling, and that might surprise them. Anything that's applicable to their specific business is what they want you to communicate to them about. So rather than, and I've learned this lesson myself, rather than checking in to see how they're doing, focus on the fascinating. So you kind of act as the CIA of their business, like you're watching out for what they might experience and you want to give them a heads up about that. Some cool ways to do this is to identify and clarify some educational insights, anything that they might find compelling. They're more likely to meet with you and engage with you when the short-term pandemic is over, if they feel like you've kind of been on their side and watching out for them during this difficult time. So intel equals insights. So any valuable information that you can provide to them is probably the email or the note that they're going to open. So rather than checking in, you might start with, you may not be aware of X, and then lead into whatever industry trend is or what you've learned that their competition might be launching. It's necessary to make it personal and keep it relational, but it absolutely needs to be of value to them. They're not necessarily interested in what you can do for them as a partner. I mean, I still send out a card that outlines all of our capabilities. That's because once the relationship is developed and I've been through this crisis with them, they may need our services and I want them to know that, but that's not what I talk about in my communication with them. So the bottom line is to be genuine, surprise with some unexpected intel and insights that they maybe aren't taking the time to look for themselves, and keep it meaningful. Treat them like a family member that you actually like. I was going to say family, but not all families get along, so I'm not going to go there. Some channels that I've used that I know are effective: handwritten notes. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten a really appreciative email from somebody that I took the time to do a handwritten note. Emails are good. Text, if you have access to those personal cell phone numbers. Phone calls, voicemails aren't always answered, but if it's just a good follow-up, maybe I would suggest that. And personalized video obviously works because people like face-to-face. It makes the initial interaction a little deeper, and really is a great way to start the relationship.
For sure. Great insight. Absolutely. One of the other things, I know we're, like we said, talking about different things in the chat. So feel free to drop things in the chat, Q&A. Like we said, we want to answer as many things as we can. So George, maybe you want to talk a little bit about one of the questions we had last time was donations versus offers on your website. I know a lot of people are kind of curious if they should be selling or offering anything right now, if it's, if it's taken the wrong way from their audience, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about that type of stuff.
Yeah, actually there's some interesting things going on. I think Shannon and Ryan both had some interesting observations on that. Ryan, you want to talk about the unique thing you saw?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of local businesses are finding kind of creative ways to drive revenue and just try and keep money coming through their business. And a local business that I saw actually was a local barber shop that was doing a raffle. So they're doing a year's worth of free haircuts for a person, so up to 12, I think, so one every month. And they're doing raffles for that. So I think it was like $20 for a raffle ticket, and they were going to do a big drawing at the end of the month. And then they were also doing, anybody that put in a raffle ticket got a massive discount on their merchandise as well. So again, it's just trying to keep their diehard customer base really engaged with their business and try and help them support their business without just asking for blatant donations or not having any cash flow. So there are just a lot of different unique ways that people can use their website, or if they have merchandise, or if they have service offerings that they can offer a raffle kind of approach to that. So that was one of the things that I'd seen recently that I thought was pretty interesting in terms of how people are doing that. So
I saw a German travel company that sent out a really nice email, and they were thanking everybody, thanking for those people that canceled their trips right away so they could cut their expenses. They offered some vouchers, and they thanked people for doing that, and thanked people that rebooked. And they were very honest. They said, you're helping us stay in business.
Wow.
By doing this, and we'll take good care of you, and as soon as we can, we'll be back traveling again. And I thought that was really sincere, and I mean, the transparency was really nice. I think that worked really well.
absolutely. And I think it's interesting to just how you can get your, like I said, your diehard customers or your people that are really engage in your business and want to support you, the things they'd come to help you with, but it kind of adding value as well. One of the things that we had in the last webinar, somebody was asking about, is it overstepping to sell at this time? What are your thoughts on that, George?
I think it's okay to sell if you're just offering something that's a value. I don't know that people have a need of your services right now, and that's fine. However, I don't think it's the time to be pushy right now. Understand people are, their budgets are tightened back, and really it's a long-term play. If you engage and keep in contact, I think that's the thing. You want to keep the relationship going, and you can quickly turn it off if you just push sell, sell, sell. And they'll figure out, they know what you do. And as long as you kind of keep top in mind and really provide them with useful information and things that they can use, I think that's, they'll buy when they're ready.
Absolutely.
I think that's absolutely critical, and has a lot to do with the communication, because if you ask somebody, obviously we don't know how long this pandemic is going to last, but this is short term. This isn't going to be the rest of our lives. So, but what about a business's future and their long-term strategy? That's long-term. So I think we need to be thoughtful in our messaging as well, that we don't focus on the short-term pandemic, we focus on the long-term strategy. And that's why offering insights to the future growth and their goals and the business's purpose overall is what's critical. And that's what's going to really entrench that relationship for when our services might be of use to them.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think that's a good point, Shannon. One of the things we talked about just with people's marketing in general is during this time, what you really need to be doing is watching the data and making sure your ROI is high. You know, you're getting a positive ROI, so you don't waste any money at this
Right.
point.
Absolutely. Real quick, I wanted to say we do have a couple of Q&A questions coming in, but I also did publish a poll. So if you are attending, make sure to vote on that poll, and we'll look at some of the results here. But we asked this in the last webinar, but we're just curious on what your guys' approach for your business is doing with your marketing. So are you cutting budgets? Are you expanding to reach more people and really doubling down on your marketing efforts? Are you staying the same, or are you unsure? So feel free to fill that in. We'll leave that poll open for a couple more minutes here so we can get everybody's input, so we can kind of weigh in on that. But another question that we had in the Q&A tab here was, if you really don't know what your business's unique value is, what is a good way to determine this from your customer's perspective? So I know, George, we always talk about value proposition a lot. Maybe you can give a little bit more talk about how to really know what your unique value proposition is and some ways that they can help determine that from the customer's perspective.
Yeah, you know, it's amazing how many companies don't have a clear idea what their unique value they're giving to their customers is. And honestly, sometimes that's what you think may be your value proposition, a lot of times isn't to your customers. You know, when we talk to companies, they'll say, well, it's quality work and it's, you know, customer service. And when we had one case in particular, that's what they thought their value proposition was. Their customers thought they were just the lowest priced. And so there was a big disconnect in how they were going to talk to their customers. You can try asking your customers. You should try to be in touch with your customers, but realize that they won't always tell you the truth. And partly, one, to be nice, and partly you have to sometimes drill down. If you don't ask, you can't tell. The other thing you can do is you can test some of your value proposition through like strategic marketing. You could craft a series of messages, ads as it were, and test which messaging people resonated with. There's a lot of interesting ways that you can kind of test what your value proposition is. It's not an easy thing, though. I will say, if it was easy, everyone would know it off the top of their
Well, we've also done a
head.
couple of things where we facilitated workshops to meet with like a leadership team from the company to help the company identify what the internal value proposition is, because sometimes the disconnect starts internally, where you've got some folks believing that your value prop is X and employees on the floor think it's different. That sometimes that's a good place to start, but it usually you can garner deeper learnings if you get a third party involved to talk to your customers on your behalf.
Absolutely. So I'm going to end the poll for everybody here that weighed in, but interestingly enough, last time we had a lot of people, the majority of folks were staying the same with their spend. And right now we're kind of at an even split between folks that are cutting money or cutting their budgets to save money, and then also expanding reach with more advertising dollars and putting more effort into trying to reach more people. So kind of an interesting breakdown from this week to week. And we'll continue to kind of just hear everybody's inputs, because people are either retracting in or pushing back out. So interesting. I'll share those results so everybody can see them. Awesome. So we have a couple more questions here that I just answered one of them privately. So that's good. We can kind of keep moving here.
Do you want to mention what that question was, Ryan? I thought it was kind of interesting.
Oh, sure. Yeah. The question was from Deb. She was asking why we're wearing mics, and if that's just a preference, or if having headsets or earbuds is helpful at all. And I just said that it is definitely helpful for quality, because then you have the mic right by your mouth compared to coming out of your computer, and then it picks up all the ambient noise and everything. So having having a mic is definitely helpful, even if it is just an Apple earbuds. You don't have to have a really expensive headset if you don't have the money or time to get one. So,
well, and it also sort of having the earbuds in curtails the sound in your general environment. So you may have other people around. So you're not broadcasting out to a larger group around you. So your sound sphere is a little bit tighter. And
absolutely.
like you said, it's better quality.
For sure. Yeah, and I know that kind of bleeds into our next topic, Mark. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of our guide to video conferencing. So maybe you can give everybody the rundown if this is, something that they're not used to, whether it's doing Zoom calls or hopping on video chat or doing webinars or any of that type of stuff. This is going to become a lot more mainstream as it is already now with Zoom. I think, 20xing their user base in like the last 2 weeks or something like that. So maybe give some folks some of the benefits of doing it, and then also which apps do we recommend and why, whether it's Zoom or GoToMeeting or some of the other ones out there.
Yeah, so there's a number of different things. Obviously, the benefit is connection. I think the biggest benefit is that you connect, you see people. So with the video side of the chat, it allows that, even though we can't be face-to-face, it allows that sort of face-to-face communication. It makes for a greater collaboration amongst groups. So, and it kind of depends on if you're doing an internal to an external. Internally, we do, we have done GoToMeetings, Zoom meetings quite a bit in the past. What we're doing now is we are all doing a Zoom or GoToMeeting for all of our internal meetings. So small group, large group, full company. It makes it very good. So we're all touching in. We all have communication with each other. We know what each other's doing. We know what each other's needs are, so that we maintain a communication. From an external perspective, I do a lot of calls, and it depends on the service. Usually it depends on the company that I'm working with, what the preferred service is. But meetings about projects, you get everybody on the same page quicker, easier. You don't have to get everybody in the same room. We can all be virtually there. The other thing is doing a sales presentation. Again, I work with a lot of people that are geographically dispersed from central Iowa. So I would not necessarily be able to meet those people all the time, but allows us to walk people through our estimate or our proposal and talk about pros, cons, benefits, why we chose to formulate the estimate or proposal the way we did, get their immediate feedback as opposed to waiting, just sending an estimate, waiting for them to come back to us. It allows us to feel a little bit more connected with the client. I think it helps. It always helps, I think, when presenting in a sales proposal or presentation, because it allows you to immediately address some of the questions that may come from it. And it shows your perspective. We tell them why we chose these things. And a lot of times that is very difficult to get across in a printed or written form. In regards to other things that you can use the video conferencing or webinars for is remote diagnostics. We're seeing a lot more telehealth, especially now. Everyone is requested to contact their provider before they would go to that provider or to the hospital. And so you can get a lot of things done that way. There are diagnostic tools now that they can use to help with that. And we do a lot of this for equipment or hardware troubleshooting. Since we do a lot of interactive work and our stuff is in museums around the US, sometimes it's just not practical for us to be there. And being able to take your phone and see what they're seeing and then go through your troubleshooting steps and actually seeing it is very beneficial for us. And then another good use is a design review. So whether you're developing software, hardware, or marketing, go through all of the process with your provider with your team, both internal and external audiences. It works very well for that. There are a lot of platforms available. We choose to use mainly Zoom and GoToMeeting. And the reason we choose these is we tend to have, or the reason we have the two as our main ones. Zoom allows you to play video and audio from the computer, so I could push a video to you guys and you would be able to hear the audio, where GoToMeeting doesn't have that functionality. And so we produce a fair amount of video work, and animation, so being able to present that, walk people through it, talk people through it, and for them to hear the audio is extremely important for us. So that's why we choose Zoom. GoToMeeting, it's just another platform. It was the first platform that we use. We still have a lot of our meetings set up in it. You know, we're a company of 16, 17 people, and we are sometimes, every one of our licenses for Zoom and GoToMeeting are being used. So it's just another platform, and B, what is the best usage, what are you trying to do, and what is the best software for that. There's a number of other, probably the top ones are Microsoft Teams. Teams is included in the Office 365. So if you have Office 365, you have Teams included. Then there's Google Hangouts. So if you have the G Suite Business Suite, it's included in that. So there's another, you know, a number of these are available with software applications that you may already have. And then there's probably the next big one is the WebEx. And that, I tend to have a lot of the companies that we work with, large companies tend to use WebEx. But again, for us, the reason we don't use it is GoToMeeting was a better fit for us at the beginning, and then Zoom because of the ability to play video and audio. So you just have to sort of look at what you have. If you have software applications, especially like G Suite or the Microsoft Office 365, those are included in that. So, you know, that's a good choice because you already are paying for that software. Then there's sort of the technical side of it. What do you need? Well, it depends on what you want to do. If you want to share video, you obviously need to have a camera. So that you can put that. Most laptops anymore have cameras built in, so that's not necessarily an issue. You alluded to earlier why we have headsets, just because it makes the audio a little bit better. I think it makes the presentation better. It's a little bit, because you know they move, so it's a little bit, can be sometimes distracting. One of the things that I use for some meetings is I have a wireless headset that's a Bluetooth headset. It also has a microphone into it. These are noise canceling, so if I'm in an environment or if activity, there's a fair amount of activity around me, I want to drown that out. These tend to allow a little bit more of the ambient sound around you in. So if you want to focus completely, I tend to use a Bluetooth headset that has the noise canceling. And George has a wired headset with a microphone. So, you know, again, that it gives him a little bit more. It gives him a little bit better audio quality to his ears. And with the mic boom coming down closer to his mouth, he gets a little bit better audio level than us.
You don't wear those noise canceling headphones at home much, do you, Mark?
Sometimes, because sometimes our dogs can be
dogs bark.
a little rambunctious. But then the mic, they pick it up, but it's just the background noise. I've been at events where I have to have a online meeting like this, and so I'll use those at that because it just brings down all the ambient audio. Probably one of the bigger things that we're going to hear more and more about is security. How secure are these things? Well, you know, we alluded to, I think in our last call or last webinar, that if it's software and it's someone wants into it, the likelihood of them being able to hack in is going to be pretty high. I know all of the companies are working very hard at securing that or beefing up their security. A couple of things that I think are good best practices, maybe is a way to put it, is if you're doing one, for example, for this one, because we are pushing out, it's not a private meeting. We allow people to come in, but we are doing it in a webinar format so that we can control audio and video. So we could allow someone, one of the participants or attendees, to have access, to use their mic to go to the audience, but we have control of that. And the other thing, so having waiting rooms, that way you can know who's in your waiting room. You can admit them into your meeting so that you know exactly who's there. That tends to be a good best practice. Make sure that the password protection is enabled. That was one of the big things. That's why Zoom was having challenges, is that was not, it was a part of their settings, but it wasn't enacted or made available, or excuse me, it wasn't turned on. So that you had to have a password to get into a meeting. So they've changed that. And so now that is the default setting. So you have to have the password to get into a meeting. Invite attendees from the conferencing software. If you're trying to maintain the highest level of security that you can do, you invite them from the software. That way they have to be registered with the software to be able to be entered into your meeting. You can also have a default setting where the host, if you're in a meeting as opposed to a webinar, where the host has the control of sharing the screen. So some software is set up so that anyone can share the screen at any time. And our recommendation is that you make it so the host, so someone has to ask for permission to share their screen. The host has to give them permission to share their screen. And then the host can rescind it right away if there's a challenge or something that they don't want. And then make sure, the biggest thing, and this is probably with every bit of software, is to make sure you're using the latest version, because they're always adding security patches to things. And so making sure that you're update. Another, just a little thing to think about is whatever software you're using, if they have an app, it's most better to use the app from a security standpoint. So that, because then you do have end-to-end encryption. If it drops off, so if you, I mean, most of them have it for your cell phone, but if you have a dial-in and someone dials in, that loses then that secure link from wherever the host dial-in system is at. So these are some of the things that, best practices, security things. If there's any questions about these, we can certainly, you can send them to us. You can answer them now, or ask them now, and we'll try to get them answered. So that's sort of my little 2-minute spiel on that, although I know it was more than 2 minutes.
Awesome. I know we have a couple of questions there's some people typing, so we'll let those come in through the system here. While we're waiting here though, Shannon, do you want to talk a little bit about, one of the questions we had in the last webinar was email frequency. So people are curious about how often they should be reaching out, how much is too annoying. Maybe we can share a little bit about that from your experience, and then also just things that you've seen in the industry.
Actually, George has got that covered.
Okay. George?
Thank you. Sure. I think Shannon will agree. That's probably the question, one of the questions she gets asked most often.
Yes.
What do you tell people, Shannon?
I tell them, I think more communication is better, but the content needs to be compelling.
Yes, that's very true. There's tons of research out there, and a lot of it contradicts other research. So you really don't know until you do your own testing. Because it's not just the frequency alone, there's that quality of the content that's a factor. That's a qualitative one, which is a little harder to measure. So there again, it's kind of, you really have to keep your eye on what you're doing. However, in some recent research, this was from CoSchedule, where they did an analysis of 20 different email studies. When they asked customers how often they want mail, the two highest were at least monthly and at least weekly. And I think the rule of thumb from the research is that in B2B, 1 to as many as 5 times a month, I would say either once monthly to weekly. B2C can be a little bit more than that. Of course, if it's just strictly a sales message, then that's, once a month may be too much. And there's, some companies that have played around, have really been able to tweak their open rates, excuse me, dramatically just by varying the frequency, finding that optimum for their particular industry and their particular messaging. So most people, I think, are either afraid because they think that people are getting their emails too much. Well, honestly, in the email, you're not going to get noticed most of the time. A good target open rate would be 30%. If you can get 30%, that means your list is fairly targeted and your quality, your subject line, your quality is good. If it's below that, especially if it's a lot below, you have to look at, is this the right list of people? Are they interested in what I'm doing, or am I just not interesting at all? Any thoughts from anybody else on that?
Sure. I think just from the things we've seen too, that a lot of the research is showing that it can take sometimes up to 12 touches just to even get a response from people. So I think you think about a normal would you just cold call somebody 12 times in a row to get a pickup? A lot of times, no. But like you said, you're fighting that sea of the inbox that comes through. So I think just from the things we've seen, as long as things are relevant and you're being respectful of someone's time, you're not getting the 20 emails at one time. It's spaced out over time. I think it kind of helps build that rapport a little bit more and kind of gives you just a different way to continue to educate or warm people up a little bit to what you're trying to say. Because a lot of times, especially now, email is a pretty inexpensive way to do that if you have an existing list that you're trying to stay in front of. And especially right now, if people can't physically come into your business, sometimes that's your only lifeline to get direct contact to these people. So it's kind of an interesting time.
I think you just can't, you have to be careful to not operate from a place of fear. And it's timing is everything. And they may not see the first 3 to 5 emails that you send. And so if your content is good, you know who you're talking to, and you've got a good message, there's nothing wrong with sending it and reaching out multiple times. And when the stars align, it'll be there. And if it gets to an unsubscribe situation, then it wasn't meant to be, let it go and move on to the next. And that's okay. It can't be, I don't want to irritate them or I'm bothering them. Look, if you've got something good to say, a good piece of intel to offer them or an insight about their business, they're going to want to talk to you eventually.
Well, and I think people underestimate the number of touches it takes really before people will, especially colder prospects, will talk to you. Sometimes 8 to 12 touches, depending on the what it is and the business. And that's not just email. That could be touching in multiple different channels. But consistency is, I think, one of the most important things. Is just sustaining that over a period of time.
Sure. Yeah, and I think it's interesting too. A lot of folks now, if they weren't content marketing before, now they might be considering it just because the given state of the situation. So I think that's kind of an interesting piece outside of just email, whether it's social media or putting out free trainings or workshops or whatever their business or service does to try and just add value in a virtual sense. So, okay, let's see here. I'm just going to check and see if we had any more questions in the Q&A. And again, we want to just tailor this completely to our live audience. So if anybody's here that has questions, feel free to send them in the Q&A or drop them in the chat box, and we're happy to answer anything regarding connecting with your customer. So let's see here. Those were the main points. Mark, did you want to touch base just a little bit more on some of the best practices for virtual meetings? I know you mentioned the hardware and some of the things, but if somebody's looking to get started and maybe they're fearful of some of the things that you had mentioned, what are some rousing words for those folks that are trying to do virtual meetings and use it for their business?
Experiment. Do it with your internal audience. Get feedback. If you have close customers, people that you have a really good relationship, work with them, have them do your experimentation internally, then gradually add people until you have the confidence. It's pretty amazing that, you can do most of it with a cell phone now. If you need to have a little bit higher end or more focused, there's a number of ways to accomplish that. We do virtual meetings, virtual demonstrations, but we're bringing in professional cameras, professional audio, so that the whole production element is at a very high level. But you can get a lot done with just your cell phone. And this, with the cell phone to one of the meeting apps, would allow you to do that, do a webinar to your group. And then, as you progress, you may want to add to the feature set that you're doing, which would involve maybe a little bit higher end production value to it, being able to not only have be the live video, but be able to incorporate your a slide deck of some sort, or videos that would play. Allow people to do the two-way Q&A if you have the audience has the ability, and you want to open it up to that. So recommendation is always experiment, start small, get comfortable with it, feel confident that you're going to deliver, because then you'll do a much better job delivering to your audience.
The other thing that I want to add, we got some feedback from last week about, and this is from a company that was based in Torrance, California, about how nice it was to meet some of the Applied Art team, and how it's just a casual, informative environment. And I think this pandemic, short-term pandemic, I'm going to start saying from now on, because I just don't want to believe it's going to last forever, has kind of humanized all of us, where I've had to let my dog out twice. Somebody's got allergies. We're just people. This is just kind of how the conversation should be. This is how we should be talking to each other all the time. So while it's unique and different, realize that nobody is expecting perfect lighting and to go uninterrupted. And I was laughing before the live audience joined us, because my neighbors decided to cut his tree down, and I was hoping that I would be able to mute enough so that y'all wouldn't hear that. So I think that just keep all of that in mind. We're just people trying to make the best of this. And actually, I think it's better for all of us to just relate a little more casually. We're all in the same boat.
Absolutely.
It makes us all a little bit more human. It shows, that, last weekend at our last one, I had someone come ring the doorbell, and, who would have expected that in this day and age that someone would come during the middle of the day and ring a doorknob or doorbell? So
For
seems
sure.
there's a question.
Yep. So we have a question just came in. So do you foresee this situation changing B2B communications in the long term? Could virtual meetings and video conferencing become the new normal? And it's a very interesting question, especially with where we've been. Like, we've been using video conferencing tools for years, but a lot of folks are kind of getting dragged into this because now they have to do it. It's one of those things. So Mark, do you have some input on that?
Yeah, I think in the short term, it definitely is the new normal. You can see that by just the stats. Zoom alone, just one company, in the span of 1 month, went from 20 million to 200 million customers. That's just mind-boggling to me. And I do think it's going to be at least the first series of steps. Instead of having face-to-face meetings, I think we're going to have more virtual meetings through the first steps of the communication. It allows you to have the connection, but it's not you're not having the cost of doing the face-to-face. Now, that's different if we're in the same town. But if we're not in the same town or even in the same state, I think you'll see a lot more of these.
I read an article the other day about how people are anticipating that handshaking may very well go away in the near future. And that doesn't surprise me at all. And I really think, yeah, fist bump, elbow bump, whatever it is, so awkward.
tap.
But anyway, no. Anyway, I do. I think I think companies that were uncomfortable or had trust issues with people working from home have adapted to realize that that can be done efficiently. And that virtual meetings are, number one, pretty convenient for, if you've got sick kids or you've got a weird schedule, life can go on, and we're learning to navigate that. And I feel like at least our company, we've done it tremendously well because everybody's, still doing what they need to do. So I think it could be this way moving forward.
Yeah, I think you'll see a lot more only because people are forced to be comfortable with it now.
Mm-hmm.
People that didn't do it before, it's like, yeah, it's not a big deal. Let's go have a meeting.
Sure. And I think it's interesting too. We were talking about this off broadcast earlier, how it's almost, it's better with I know a lot of people are fearful of putting their webcam on or showing their face. They just want to call in like a phone call, which is fine. But I really think this face-to-face element really does keep it more connected, because if you're disconnected from your workforce for months and months or weeks and weeks or however long this takes, it can kind of make you feel a little less connected from the team. But even this morning, we had our call with our 16 people on Zoom. There's all the little tiles and stuff, but you can still see people. And I think that's a really good element, even if it's just for 5 minutes a day or 10 minutes or whatever it is, just to kind of keep that human element to it and keep it, engaging still. So it's not just phone calls and emails. It's more connected. You can see who you're working with. So,
Tom Woody's asked an interesting question as well.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so Tom asked, do you feel that virtual meetings will replace live events? And how do you think the events industry will bounce back from the pandemic? Well, Mark does a lot of in-person live events. So Mark, why don't you take this one?
Yeah, I don't think it will replace live events. Well, let me rephrase. I think it will replace some live events. I don't think it will replace all live events. I still think there's a tremendous value in a trade show or an event because there's very little times when you will have the ability to look at potential customer or competitor A, B, and C and evaluate them right then and there and go back in between. So I truly don't think that live events will be replaced by this. Now, that being said, I think that some of the live events may be smaller. We do, and there's some things that are more practical to be done this way. Especially if you have extremely large, difficult equipment to set up, or sometimes you cannot set them up. We did work with a company that they could not, at the trade show floor, they could not set up one of their large machines. So we just had a production crew in their integration center. We were at the trade show. People had two-way communication. I think we'll start seeing this type of technology adapted to make better presentations to people in live events. In regards to, do I think that the industry will come back? I do think the industry will come back. I think we'll probably see a ramp up. I guess it's going to be 2001, 2008 when we had the 9/11, and then when we had the economic crisis. It took a while for that industry to come back, but it came back. It came back hardier than it was, and I think that we'll see that again.
Sure.
I see that Tom's live on here now.
Yeah, Tom, if you have a mic, feel free. I'm going to unmute you if you wanted to ask any more questions about the live events and maybe how it's relating to yourself.
Well, and I'd like to get Tom's opinion too, because obviously you're in the live event business in some ways. I suspect that after this over, it's going to be very competitive for customers, and I think live events are going to play a big part of that. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, and it's one of the assumptions that I've made that we're going to be seeing a lot of markets be impacted, the larger ones especially, as far as large scale conventions are going. So one of the things that I'm discussing and looking into further is how a market like Des Moines or Kansas City or Omaha might start picking up some of these medium to larger events, just because a place like McCormick Center or McCormick Place in Chicago is going to be a hospital for a few months. And so how does that change the landscape of live events? But I think a lot of people are eager to get back. A lot of people are eager to get out of their homes even. And I think that it will be one of those things that you can't replace a live event, but we're even seeing, we had a client that we took online entirely, and they normally have a pretty good general session, but their attendance tripled in size just because there's a want to get out there. And it's maybe people that aren't able to make it practically to a live event, or looking even at international audiences. How can they now start to engage without having to book a flight across the pond?
You should probably give a little introduction to yourself, Tom, for the people that don't know who you are and who you're with.
Yeah, so my name's Tom Woody. I work with Freeman. I'm based here in Des Moines, but work with clients around the region and around the country.
And Freeman does events and exhibits and a lot of stuff, actually.
Yep, anything from live events to trade show expos to now a whole lot of digital virtual.
Are you, yeah, I was going to ask, what are you seeing in the digital virtual trade show and event space?
So a lot, there's definitely a lot of interest. It's one of those things that I think a lot of people have been skeptical about. How do I do a virtual event without cannibalizing my audience? And now you don't have to worry about it. You just have to worry about getting people in general. So I think this is going to really shape the landscape of virtual events moving forward, or at least having a virtual element to your live event. Again, like I said, I don't think it's going to replace in-person live events, but I think it's going to keep that conversation going of how do I bring more people to my event, even if it's not live.
Yeah. And I think, and then like you said, I think throwing in a virtual with a traditional will make a huge impact. One of the show that we just finished, Con Expo, we did Facebook Live stuff. We did it 2 times a day, not the first day, but the second and third and fourth day. And we were having audiences in the 4,000 to 7,000 people, which that is a big show, but it, like you said, it allows people to come to the show without having to physically be there. And I think we're going to, in the next Con Expo, we're going to continue to expand upon that to try to give them a little bit more of the experience than just taking people through the booth, like being able to schedule and have subject matter experts so that they can have communication with them. Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more of that integrated into an event package.
Well, I think additionally, from the exposition side, if you're going to a live event, likely you're extroverted like myself, and you're going to shop around, you're going to talk with folks. But especially if you're going to an industry expo, you're going to shop around for your business, find a product that or a solution that is useful to you in your day to day. And I think it's going to allow people in these various industries who may be slightly more introverted to be able to connect with people. We're talking about taking expos online and how we can still work networking in, and how you can go to a page and then set a meeting and schedule a meeting right there virtually with somebody, or even having virtual expo hours where somebody's just sitting there live or a couple people, and you just kind of click to learn more, and you're in a room like this talking with folks about your products. So I think for brands and people that are pushing these products out there, there's really a lot of opportunity as well.
And potential cost savings too, you know,
Yes.
for some such scenarios.
Yeah, especially just from a attendee standpoint too. Just I think the personal will never go away, just because the networking that you can have at these events, even if it's not an exhibit or something, just the face-to-face interaction. There's a lot of things you can't facilitate naturally. So that's kind of a good part that I think won't fall off of the industry.
Right.
So.
And I would say, and I don't want to cannibalize your guys' event here, but another thing that we're seeing and conversations that we're having are, these virtual events are highly sponsorable. You're creating a microsite or you're creating breakout sessions. And right now, your typical sponsor is really wanting to engage with their people because they don't have the outlet that they used to at your show or your event. So, there's a lot of people that are scaling back, but a lot of sponsors we're seeing are wanting to come on board because they don't have that opportunity to engage these people and get their name out there, and they don't want to miss out on it. So people are actively looking for this opportunity, and it's great for a lot of associations and people who host different kind of expos or events like this, because they can help cover nearly all of the costs of their event to go online just by getting sponsorable content out there.
For sure. Awesome. Well, we're coming up on time. So Tom, we're gonna put you back down to attendee. So sorry about that.
Thank you, Tom, for coming on
thank you.
and sharing
Thanks,
that.
Tom. Good to see you again.
Yeah.
And we will put you back to attendee. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
And before we quit, I think it's good to say, so here was a webinar. We had someone who had vested interest in the industry and had a question that we were involved in. We were able to provoke them from an attendee to a panelist so that they could share, and then we were able to push them back down to be an attendee. So it's a good way for you have control of your meeting and your situation.
Absolutely. And thanks so much, Tom, for hopping on last minute. I just clicked a button and hopefully he was ready to talk. So thanks for being willing to
that
chat
was not
with us.
planned. That was
Yes.
totally just spontaneous.
There's another rule. Always go dressed to these.
Absolutely. Okay, well, I think we're coming in on time. Thank you guys so much again for everybody's time, just to learn more about this and listen to us kind of talk a little bit more and share with you guys. So if this is your first time here, thanks again for coming. We're planning on doing these more regularly every week, just trying to keep you guys updated with some different information. So if we didn't get to any of your questions today, or you're kind of camera shy or did not want to drop anything in the comment section, feel free to drop those in the Q&A and or email them to us at ideas@appliedart.com, and we will make sure to include them in the next broadcast or send you an email directly and answer those questions for you. So again, thanks so much for everybody for coming on, and we appreciate the time and the effort that you guys are putting in here. So
Happy Good Friday and happy Easter, everybody.
Yes.
Stay safe.
absolutely.
Bye.